What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Raider World. So in this video, we have Feuling's BA air cleaner. Available in raw, black, or chrome finish, and with a solid or a clear cover, and with the option of either a red or black reusable filter element. This new bolt-on BA air cleaner from Feuling features the Milwaukee 8 throttle body 3-hole bolt pattern for an easy installation, high flow billet aluminum velocity stack that extends the intake runner with an optimal opening diameter, outer lip, and internal taper down to a direct match of the throttle body. A one-piece billet cage with a reusable air filter element. So in the box, you get your BA air cleaner. Now these do come in two different sizes. You have this size here, and then you have your Race Series option, which is a lot bigger. I have a red filter element, or you can go with a black filter element. I chose the black finish. They also have chrome and raw. I went with a clear view cover. You can also get the solid cover. I have the polished chrome velocity stack. I do believe they have those in different colors. You get two new breather bolts, backplate O-ring, inner and outer breather O-rings, a new gasket. I do have two sets of spacers because I received the previous version of the backing plate that didn't have the external breather option. So you might just receive one, and you only use these if you removed your throttle body bracket. You get some red Loctite, and then obviously your instructions. So right out of the box, the Feuling air cleaner is set up with the OEM style cylinder head breather bolts with optimized vent hole locations that route back into the intake to meet emission standards. Now for those looking for that blow-by external breather solution, the backing plate is also equipped with an external breather modification design that routes that oily mist away from the intake and into an external filter or catch can. And Feuling also has this external breather kit available that includes the fittings, vent lines, and filter elements. So here you have Feuling's external breather kit. You get two filter elements with breather lines, some cable ties, Loctite, fittings, and then your instructions. So right out of the box, the BA air cleaner backplate is equipped to add on these external breathers. All you have to do is remove the existing set screws and install the fittings they provide in the external breather kit. Now for tools, I use a foot-pound torque wrench, inch-pound torque wrench, a ratchet, an extension, a 5/32 long hex bit, 5/32 regular hex bit, 1/8 hex bit, 5/16 socket, 7/16 socket, a 5/64 Allen, and a Loctite that they provided. So to get this air cleaner installed, I have to get it disassembled first. So to remove this cover, I'm using a 5/32 hex bit. So if you noticed, when I remove these cover screws, you have two different sizes. You have a longer one and a shorter one. The longer ones are gonna go into your cage here. And to remove your velocity stack, you have these 3 screws. So these plastic nuts, you can just toss them. They're just to keep everything together so nothing gets damaged. Here you have another gasket. So here you have your velocity stack. And then you have another gasket. So here's a closer look at your one-piece billet cage. If you notice here, you have an S and a T. That's gonna be for your softail or your touring. Here you have the Feuling logo. And made in USA. So Feuling spent a lot of time in research and development when it came to making this velocity stack. Feuling does have a video on their channel going a little bit more in depth on this velocity stack and exactly what it does for your intake. So here you have your cover with the Feuling logo. This is where your clear cover sits inside of here. Then you have your two gaskets. And even with this filter element, you have your Feuling logo right here. So here you have your backing plate. This is where you have your external breather option. You just remove these set screws and install the fittings that come in the external breather kit. And even on the top of the backing plate, you have your Feuling logo there and USA. So to get the back plate ready for the external breather kit, I have to remove the two set screws that are on the bottom, and then you have a set screw on each side, and then I'm also installing set screws to block the vent holes off from the inside. So I keep my set screws in a magnetic bowl, that way I don't lose them. So to remove the two bottom port set screws, I'm using a 5/32 hex bit. And for the outer set screws, I'm using a 1/8 hex bit. Now because the set screws had some thread locker on them, I'm gonna go ahead and thread chase these holes. So for the smaller set screw that comes in the kit, you're gonna use a Loctite that they provided. You're gonna go in through the outside of the backing plate, through the breather channel, and then there's a venting hole on the inside. You're gonna screw it into there. So for the small set screw, I'm using a 5/64 Allen. Now you just wanna get it down nice and snug. You don't wanna over tighten and possibly strip out that set screw. And it's the same thing on the other side. Now I'll take the other two set screws that came in the kit and I'll install them in the two outer ports. And same thing with these, you're gonna use the Loctite that they provided. And to tighten these down, I'm using a 1/8 hex bit. Same thing with these, just get them down nice and snug. Now I'll take the two NPT fittings that came in the kit and I'll install them on the bottom. And same thing with these, you're gonna use the Loctite that they provided. And to tighten these fittings down, I'm using a 5/16 socket. And same thing with these, just get them down nice and snug. So now I'll remove the air cleaner. This is the older style Screaming Eagle heavy breather. I'll take out these three screws and I'm using a 3/16 hex bit with an extension. Now for the blow by on this section, it's not as bad as the last time before I installed the transmission top cover from Trask Performance and the vented dipstick from Feuling. Now looking under the breather bolts, I am seeing a lot of oil here and some oil under here. And now I'll remove the two breather bolts, and they're a T45. So on the rear breather bolt, you can see there's more oil. So all this oil is going back in through the intake, which is not good. So here's the front breather bolt. We have more oil. So now I'll take out these three screws and they're 5/32. So here you have the back side of the back plate. As you can see, there's more oil in here. So obviously there's still oil going in through the intake. Not as bad as the first time, but definitely still some more oil going in. All right guys, so I'm gonna open up this catch can for the Trask Performance Transmission top cover. So I haven't opened up this catch can since I installed this top cover, so let's see what's inside. All right guys, so as you can see, there's barely any oil inside this catch can. All the oil that's in here, it's caught by the filters. There's no actual pooling of any oil inside the catch can. Now I know the catch can is doing its job, but I don't know if the Trask Performance top cover is actually doing anything. I have ridden this over a few thousand miles with this top cover on. Now I know there was some oil on the breather bolts when I was taking the Screaming Eagle heavy breather off. Not as much as when it was the first time, but there was still some oil on there. Now the catch can, it's doing its job. It did catch some oil inside the filters, but there's no pooling of oil inside the can. Now I know the BA air cleaner does have the external breather option, so I'm looking forward to that. So the older version of the backing plate had a spot for that O-ring. The newer version with the external breathers does not. So installing this air cleaner is really simple. Just make sure you clean off all the mating surfaces and get off any of that old gasket that still might be on there. And also thread chase your holes. Make sure you lube up all your O-rings. Also, you want to apply some oil or lube on the underhead flanges of your breather bolts. And for these breather bolts, I'm applying red Loctite. So if your throttle body bracket is removed like mine, you're going to use these spacers. So I'll take my gasket and I'll take the velocity stack screws just to keep it lined up before I get the breather bolts in. So now I'll take my spacer, I'll put it in the back, I'll run my breather bolt through and just get it finger tight. And with these breather bolts, you want to evenly tighten them down. Make sure everything is properly seated and your O-rings aren't canted. So the torque value on these breather bolts is 22 to 24 foot-pounds. So now I'll remove the velocity stack screws. So in the instructions, Feuling has you routing these breather lines through the back side of the frame, starting from the bottom and then up to your fitting. But what I'm gonna do is modify these lines. I'm gonna have them meet right in the middle underneath the air cleaner. I'll use a T fitting right into the filter, or I might switch it later to a catch can. So on your cage, you have a T for touring and an S for softail. This is a touring model. So I'll take my T and I'll line it up with the top left hole of the back plate. Make sure you have your gasket on the back side. Get all your holes lined up. You'll take your other gasket, you'll put it on the inside of the cage, line those holes up, then just take your velocity stack, put it inside of here, make sure everything is lined up. And with the velocity stack screws, I'll use the red Loctite that Feuling provided. So I'll get my velocity stack screws in. So on T for touring, it's gonna read Made in USA on the top left. I'll take my 5/32 long hex bit and get the screw started. And same thing with these screws, you wanna tighten them down evenly. So the torque value on these screws is 72 inch-pounds. Also, with this filter, you wanna lube up both bases. I'll insert the filter into the cage where I can read Feuling. Now I'll install the cover, and same thing with these screws. I'll use some red Loctite that they provided. Just make sure you're installing it with the Feuling logo down. And I'll alternate tightening these down. So the torque value on these screws is 30 inch-pounds. Now for your external breather option, you can have this set up either way you want. You can have it going into a filter or a catch can. Now I want to put it into the filter first and see how that works out. I want to see if it catches any oil. I might switch it to a catch can later. So I'll cut a little extra and then I'll gradually cut back until I have it set where I want it. You can use some lube or some oil so the hoses slide on easier. I'm also going to take some small zip ties and secure the hoses to the fittings. Feuling's BA air cleaner. BA. Should we just leave that up to interpretation? Badass, best all around, big ass air cleaner. I don't know, I like them all.